connection to Berlin is under flames. So she is actually problematizing the way that as citizens of different countries, we are being called to ignore the violence that is being done to certain people because of their national belonging or affiliation, because of their racial or gender affiliation. So what I'm trying to do with these women with which I'm entering into this arena is to undo the way that we are being trained under empire for centuries to be oblivious to the pain or the suffering or the harm of different people because of their gender, racial, and ethnic affiliation. At the moment, the people are paying. Charles de Gaulle doesn't notice. The people are made for paying. Berlin is burning. The German people are paying. That's normal for him, the people's generality. So, as I said earlier, May 1845, if you just do a Google research about this date, but located in Algeria, not located in France, where you will see shining faces, what you see are the bodies that are lying on the ground, the victims of French massacres in Algeria. When you look at in August in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, through the American eyes of Time Life magazine, it's the war ends, right? It's not about what is going on with the people. It's about images of ending and beginning of new eras. And this is, two slides from a film that Marguerite Duras wrote the script, which is Hiroshima Mon Amour. The hospital in Hiroshima exists. How could I not have seen it? So we see with Marguerite Duras, she is engaging constantly with the question of how can this catastrophe take place in front of our eyes and we don't see them. So rather than speaking about absence of images, the question is what shaped our literacy that we don't see the catastrophe, even though it is there. It may be out of the frame, it may be articulated differently, but we cannot say that large-scale catastrophe were not shaped into images. So the question is, what happened to our perception that we don't see it? And this brings me to Sebald and his book on the natural history of destruction, and in which actually what Sebald is saying is that we didn't see images of the destruction of Germany, and is awakening, right, out of several decades of kind of sleep. And he says, in the way that the war was understood, what happened to German was not taken in account. And when I read this, I was a little bit troubled, I would say. I was a little bit troubled because he ignores completely what happened to German women. So he speaks about Germany in this kind of abstract notion without accounting for the way the German women are trying to speak about the rape that they went through for several decades. They are trying, but they are constantly being silent. And there are 200,000 children that came out of these rapes. So they are surrounding, whoever speaks about the fact that those images were not seen. And he writes, even in later years when local and amateur war historians began documenting the fall of German cities, their studies did not alter the fact that the images of this horrifying chapter of our history have never really crossed the threshold of national consciousness. So, these are just two examples of books that came out really in 45, 46, 47, very, very early, in which you see images of destruction, and they not only circulate, they are being merchandised. When they are being merchandised and they are reprinted in different places. This is, for example, an image from the Family of Men, which is a very popular exhibition that was, seen by millions of people. And this is an image from Germany. This is another image from Germany in the same exhibition. And Sebald presents these images as if they are being seen for the first time. And this is, for me, another mechanism that make us ignore what and how we are engaging with images, because these images are not being discovered by Sebald. Thinking about the catastrophe as something that individual authors like Sebald are discovering is so problematic, because it makes too much, it put too much weight on the individual image when we are speaking about 2 million victims, as if what they say, as if the images that they have cannot be counted, right? There is only the way that the single author revealed to the public for the first time those images. So as I said earlier, I'm trying to show you different, procedures to engage with the way that those images are being shaped or made inaccessible to us. So another mechanism or another procedure is by telling us that those images were unseen. They were seen, and we have to ask questions why they were published, why they circulated, and nonetheless, the presence of the rape of German women was not associated with them. And even when Sebald publishes his book, he still doesn't see the rape of German women. They are inexistent in his book. And just to illustrate to you how much these images circulated and consumed by German, here you have, a collection that I was able, to create for myself of images of destructions that circulated in Germany from the very first months of the end of the war. They were taken by people, they were printed, and they were purchased by many people. They were sent all over, etc. And I came across them for the first time when I read the account of Hannah Arendt returning to Germany from where she ran away in the 30s with the rise of the Nazi regime. And she returned to Germany immediately after the war, and she was astonished to see how much the destruction of Germany becoming, a token in different contexts. So coming back now, Hannah Arendt, Anonymous, Marguerite Duras, Sebald belongs to a different category, doesn't see the catastrophe, even though he became associated with, I will tell you that Germany also was destroyed, which is not something to discover, it's something to engage with and ask questions about. So coming back to Marguerite Duras, that wrote the script for Hiroshima Mon Amour, she wrote the script for Hiroshima Mon Amour that Alain René filmed. During the war, she worked together with Henri Cartier-Bresson and a few other people. They published a journal about the prisoners in concentration camps mainly, but not only, during the war. And so she worked closely with Cartier-Bresson. And in the diary, she writes, I think of the German mother of the little 16-year-old soldier who lay dying on August 17, 1944, alone on the heap of stones on the Quai des Arts. So here we have three manifestations of the way that Marguerite Duras engages with what will she do with the decimation of Germans only because they have to pay the price. So what you see here is the image taken by Henri Cartier-Bresson, that I don't show the image, I show, a drawing, because I don't, I refrain from drawing just to emphasize that the body was not covered and was on the bridge, which is probably an image that imprinted Marguerite Duras when she wrote this in her diary. And then when she wrote this scene in the film, where we also see the body of a German soldier on the quay after he was shot, and he was the lover of the French woman whose hair was shaven. And speaking about women whose hair was shorn in France, which was a punishment that Frenchmen in the resistance inflicted on French women with relationship with a German soldier. And we're not speaking only about the single woman in the film that Marguerite Duras wrote the scenario about, but we are speaking really about, mass women whose hair was shorn publicly. And on the top of the Google search that show you how many there are, I focused on several frames and looked at them. And why do I bring this? Why do I bring the German soldier? Because I was intrigued by the question, why does Hannah Arendt and Marguerite Duras do not account for the mass rape of German women? So of course I cannot have an answer, but I can have a speculation. I think that if Marguerite Duras knew about it, she would account for it. It goes in the in continuity with the way that she engaged with a different type of violence inflicted by white male regimes at the end of World War II. And Hannah Arendt also, I believe that she would account for it if she knew about it when she came for Germany, which makes me think that when Hannah Arendt went for Germany to 3 consecutive trips, I think the first one was in 49, 50, and 51, the rape was already removed from the public arena. And this brings me to now closer engagement with photography to show you how do I go from the first image that I showed you of the photographers, the 3 photographers in 1 square meter that didn't take photographs. How do we engage with what we have as photographs? Because they took photographs, but not photographs that are being associated with rape. So just very briefly, because I see the time, this is the image of the photographer, right? Running, will climb on, obstacles just to take the photograph. This is the image of the news. They are running out of a press conference to report to us. But when it comes to mass rape of women, we don't see this gesture. So mass rape of German women took place when Germany was destroyed from the air bombing, Bomb Away, as is the title of one of the many books of the destruction of Germany, images that were taken from the air. And much of this bombing, we know, was not part of defeating the Nazi regime that obviously should have been defeated, where much of this bombing was in order to create a new world order, which means that many of the campaigns of violence that we see at the end of the war, the mass rape of women, the neutralization of Japan as a power, the rehabilitation of Germany to bring it back to be part of these European empires with no accountability except, some symbolic things. And the massacres in, I mentioned the massacres in Algeria, a French colony. I didn't mention the massacre in Senegal and in many other places for those European power to be able to continue to hold to their colonies, mainly in Africa, but also in Asia. Coming back to Germany, Germany is being bombarded, and among these, ruins, among these half-built, half-ruined houses, the rape take place. And given that the rubble is all over, we're not speaking about rapes necessarily in interior spaces, because the notion of an interior private space no longer holds at this moment, because the inside and outside, interior and exterior, are completely being blurred by the bombing. So this is, again, a kind of Google search just to give you a feeling of the destruction. Now, I told you at the beginning that I'll show you what is the background on which I put this is the timeline. You see, this is the timeline extracts from Diary in Berlin. So the backgrounds I took from the different images that were taken in Germany during the time that the diary was written by Anonymous. I crop only the rubbles and the smoke, and I'm trying to create a connection between the level of rubbles and what Anonymous describes in the book. And the rape is at its peak when there is a lot of rubble in the roads, when there is still a lot of smoke, when there is still a complete disorder. And when there is a complete disorder, what we see also is that women are taking care of themselves, even though they are being raped, but they are taking care of themselves, and they are imagining a possibility of a world where they are leading it, not only the men, or when they are negotiating what will be the terms of after. So one way that she described that they are negotiating is through, for example, the exchange of food. They create black market, or they agree with their rapers that they will be raped only by one man rather than 5 random men in exchange of having food, or in exchange of having wine, etc., etc. So what I did, another procedure, as I said, several procedures, another procedures is related to those books that I showed at the very beginning, where we have several lines in each book about the rape. So I took randomly 8 books, and I took sentences from these books about the rape that could be a caption for an image. I don't have the image because it is an untaken photograph of rape, but I have the caption. So why do I need the image when I have the caption? It's not about viewing the body of the raped woman. It's not about viewing torn bodies. It's about reorganizing our imaginary, reorganizing the way that we understand the political regimes under which we live, that are being shaped through the rape of women and through our visual perception of violence. So I inserted these kind of black or blank squares, and I wrote the captions underneath them that are taken from the same books from which the captions were taken. This is an old version of the exhibition. You see here also the timeline and the visual essay. And this is now in Berlin. This is the table on which, I put the images and the books that I'm looking at. I will not have time to dwell on the connections that then I'm doing between existing images and these captions, because I want to end with the New World Order. So first of all, this is the cover of the book, A Woman in Berlin, 8 Weeks in Conquered City. So here is an image that should be at the very end of the timeline in terms of the rubbles. It's true that what we see is a ruined building, but look at the pavement. It is completely cleared. Look at the street. You have women dressed as women. When we read Anonymous, we read that at the beginning, they didn't dare to go outside. And if they went outside, they dressed up as men, just in order, to grab some food from a neighbor, or just to take something from somewhere. But here what we see is, in a way, life is coming back. So this is at the very end of the timeline that can be built out of Anonymous, rather than the way that this image is being presented by the press, as this is one of the scenes presented to the eyes of the Allied soldiers who entered war-shattered Berlin. This is a complete lie. This is not what they saw. This is after the women not only had been raped, but they also worked to clear the arena of rape. So when we rely on these press images that completely distort the temporality and tell us that this is the first images that they saw, and this is an image that circulated in very many different places, we know that we are being lied to, because this is when the rape is already being over, and they are actually clearing the arena from rape, and they are telling us that there was no rape, because this is the first image. As if April and May, May 45 didn't take place. So look at the pavement here, recall the pavement that we saw in the very first image when the woman ran. Oh, sorry, I'm going back instead of going forward. Okay, so here you see kind of, mid image where there are few people in the street, but there is still smoke, there is still rubble in the street. Let me go to this one when they are just understanding where they are and they are going to go away. Here you see that there is still a lot of rubble, which means that their houses are still penetrable, but the roads start to be clear. And here you see an image that I read it more closely, but now I will not have time to do it. Here you see the degree of rubble, the degree of smoke, and the way that the bodies of women is actually being accessible through the private and the public arena. And I think that I'll stop here. I wanted to speak a little bit about black market, punishment, but maybe we will end it here.
Thank you, Ariella. Well, it's so many things, as usual, in your work. I think I'd like to ask a couple questions related to your project, also to the text that you had sent me around the project, because there was a couple of ideas that you didn't specifically get to. I think it's nice to touch on. For example, the idea of evidence, which I work on in my exhibit around the Chinese deaths in Mexico, the undocumented deaths. Let's say it's just through some scattered oral history. And in your text around the rapes, the untaken or inaccessible photos of rapes, you mentioned in your text about evidence and not seeking evidence within the photograph because the evidence is there. We just have to look at it, at each photograph in a different way. But so I guess my question would be how do we make this bridge between the lack of something like evidence or what you call the archival silence in your text, what is available in the photograph, and how do we make this bridge between what is there, how we can reread or reorganize our reading, and how this can create a new national consciousness. Maybe this word that he uses, Sebald, is, although I'm a very big fan of Sebald's writing, it's a very problematic word, the national consciousness. I would say it's a national narrative, no? Something that's written for us instead of a consciousness. But so what do you make of this idea of evidence within a world where we somehow we continue seeking justice around questions like rape, murder, violence, disappearance?
Yeah, thank you, Bani, for this question. It's a very big question. I'll try to engage with part of it. I think that the category of evidence is a category that fails us in a way. And we have to be suspicious toward this category because the entire imperial project of murder, massacre, genocide, rape, mass rape, I mean, plunder, dispossession, is based on the idea that we have to bring evidence for something that really doesn't require an evidence. It was done in the open, in plain sight. How can you bring an evidence for something that was done in plain sight? That there are still so many people who can testify for it, but they are not considered as the legitimate people to testify for it. So I think that the category of evidence is a category that fails us, and deliberately so, because the entire system of a legal system or international legal system is based on evidence. right? So you have to bring evidence for which actually you cannot bring, because it's very difficult to justify the evidence or to show a reliable evidence for individual case when you're speaking about the rape of 2 million women. Who was the raper in this case? We don't know, but we know that this rape took place. So for example, when I engage with the rape of Palestinian women in 48, it was more difficult in the sense that it was not agreed upon by historians. So it was more difficult to try to take, from here and there, written evidence, oral history that was collected, etc., in order to start to build the case. I'm not even speaking about images, but in the case of the destruction of Palestine, do we need any evidence? In the case of the expulsion of Palestinians, do we need any evidence that were expelled? But if you have to now go to court and to bring evidence that Palestinians were expelled, it is possible that you will not be able to show this evidence, because the fact that there are millions of their descendants living around the world is not an evidence. So when it comes to slavery, why there is no yet, an approval of reparations for slavery? Because there is not enough evidence for what? That there was slavery. So the category of evidence is really a very, very, very problematic category when we are speaking about imperial violence that reproduces itself over centuries. Mm-hmm. And it reproduces itself over centuries across different places. There is no one type of violence that you will identify in Mexico that didn't take place also in at least 20 other places, mm-hmm. at a different moment, maybe, being perpetrated this way or not that way. So I think that rather than thinking about this violence only in terms of evidence, we have to think about it as the violence that created the regime under which this kind of violence can continue to be exercised, and that our perceptual approach to it is still determined by the way that photography was shaped by the same imperial powers that exercise the same imperial violence. So I don't know if it answers your question, yeah. But it's an attempt.
No, completely. And I think that it takes me exactly to my next question, which these are, since we've been discussing and the material you shared with me, to think about my own work, I make a connection now with the exhibit and my attempt to use photography to talk about violence and how can we do it. My next question would be, within a potential history, as you propose, within this idea of placeholders for work to be done, memory work, or let's say reparations to come, what is it possible to make photography to reshape the way, make new photography to reshape the way we think about what has been taken from us, maybe by the imposed use of photography or the omitted? Is it possible still? Is there a chance to rewrite the way we speak through photography?
I think that this is what we are trying to do all the time. I mean, many people are trying to do it all the time, and we are trying to negotiate the terms of something that was, determined against the possibility that people will claim accountability for what was taken from them, that against the possibility that people will demand restitutions or return or reparations for everything. So just yesterday, there was, a very joyful day. Just before we learned about abortion, we learned that Tamara Lanier, who is a descendant of enslaved people and is trying to sue Harvard for many, many years, tried first to talk with Harvard about the images of her ancestors that were seized from them when they were enslaved in full complicity with Harvard. And she tried to ask Harvard to recognize her as a descendant of slavery and to restitute or rematriate the images to the family. And Harvard refused to talk with her. And she tried to file a lawsuit, and the lawsuit was dismissed by the court. And then she appealed, and it took several months until yesterday. There was a decision, a very brave decision of the judges, that Harvard cannot continue not to talk with Tamar Lamir, and they allowed her to sue Harvard, because in the US you have to be allowed by the court to file a lawsuit. So yesterday was a big day for another attempt to use photography in a different way. And why it is a different way? Because it is not about only the interpretation of the images. It's about who has the right to continue to hold what was taken from others with violence. And Harvard pretends that they have property rights in the images, but given that they took these images from our ancestors with violence, the fight is to expropriate Harvard from continuing to possess those images. So for me, this is a use of photography. So the use of photography, or the use of photography cannot be reduced only to take new photographs. Taking new photographs is one way. We cannot think about it in a separate way than all the other uses of photography, in terms of what is in the photographs, in terms of what we can achieve while juxtaposing photographs, and what we can also achieve by withdrawing certain photographs from circulation, because this is also part of the battle, because we don't want constantly to see big white museums that are built on the expropriation of people of color, to see them constantly depicting the same group of people, mainly people of color or women, in vulnerable situations while they perpetrated the violence. So the question is how we transform, how we dislocate the violence from the body of the victim into the structures that are responsible for the production of this violence.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. I think that I can maybe open up now for the reading group, because we read a short essay of yours that comes from Potential History. I think some of the reading group were familiar with your work, but in Spanish there's very little translated. And since our reading group, although everyone speaks English, reads English, we thought let's concentrate on texts that are only in Spanish. Also, it's interesting to think in that way, what is accessible for a Spanish reading audience and or a reader, and what is not. So if si tienen preguntas alguien del grupo, sería bueno para Ariella, según following what we read or today's talk. Don't be shy. I have to ask you. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, mostly to it's immensely inspiring.
I don't hear you.
Sorry, I think that I'm on mute.
No, now I hear you.
Okay. Well, hello. Nice to meet you. Incredible. I think it's immensely inspiring what you said, because in a way we live prisoners of image. In a certain ways, the how to put it, I'm mostly interested in the way I'm not angry about what the institution has made with memory, but mostly with what artists can do. Artists engaged with archive research, or worried about how reorganize the imaginary. As you said, I think that was the key idea that I was in a way waiting because, as you said, it's not about viewing, and in a world that it's supposed to be in this regime, in this world where image is almost everything. It's very, very inspiring to hear you that you propose something that is not just about image, that it's more about, I don't know, maybe you use a lot of books, I mean, literature, or let's say the word, the spoken word or the written word, as a way to not protect us, but to always, maybe to, I will not say, I'm not an iconoclast, to stop of producing images, but a way to precisely find just a moment of really see how the production of images in the modernity has structured history in a way that we are not even able to say what you were saying. No, that it's not even about evidence. It's an overwhelming amount of evidence that we have of what the modern world is made. There's no bad evil or good evil, as to put it in the Hannah Arendt words. No, I mean, in the end, this kind of continuous violence against each others in the foundation of modern nations, it's crazy. But what is the limit of this? It's more, let's say, tactical question, mostly for people like me that works with archive a lot. But I'm always thinking how much we can play with this, trying to rearticulate, to make the image or the documents say what they are not giving us. They're not saying already. How to make this task, this duty, but without being trapped also in the recombinant, let's say, postmodern way of using history too. No, as Nietzsche said, that the way to fight against this sickness of past or nostalgia, or to play or to give history too much place in our lives, is not just important to forget. That maybe that's one of the conservative, cynical way to say that we all know all this violence, but we also, there's some kind of consensus about, or consent about forgetting, no? In order to reconciliate, to create the nation, to be together, to to go forward to the future, to the modern progress, let's say, to arrive to this promise of liberal world that we live in, that it's this the triumphalist imagery of liberalism that we're trapped in, and even the categories and all this. But, well, when we start to play with the documents to reorganize the imagery, where are the limits of how to, I mean, you said the captions, you have the captions, but not the image. That is super interesting to precisely, the starting point now is not how to rebuild the way we looked at the world, but to start with the captions that we have that survive, But which are the limits? If you, I mean, it's more about artistic practices that we know, and sometimes they just, we can see that there's just a kind of playing with these things, but there's something that is missing sometimes for me. We have to take this risk, or what is your thoughts on this thing? If I did some kind of sense in my question.
Oh, wait, sorry. You have to unmute.
Yeah, okay. I understand your question, but I completely disagree with all the premises. Do I hear myself twice?
Yes.
I don't know why. Maybe, is it better now? No.
I hear fine. I hear.
Is it better now? No. And now?
There's a bit of an echo.
Yeah, there is an echo. I hear it too. I hear myself.
You have it too, Bani.
Let's try now. No.
I hear you twice, and myself too.
Oh no, maybe Carlos has to close the mic. Somebody
Okay,
says.
I'm going to mute.
Is it better now? Yeah, okay. So, sorry. So I completely disagree with you because the way that you ask it, it is as if the problem is with the way that we deal with images, rather than the problem is that this violence is still there and did not arrive to any closure. So what I disagree with, to make it very simple, is the understanding that we have to move forward, that we have to rely on progress, on this, technology that destroyed the world. The progress is a technology of destruction, is not a promise. The future is a technology of destruction, is not a promise. And the way that people are struggling with trying to make sense of the violence that was done to them and to their ancestors, for me, is not a play, is not superficial, is an anti-colonial engagement with trying to understand not only what was done to us, what was done to others, but how we can oppose to it in a world that is doing everything for us not to oppose it, for example, in the name of progress, for example, in the name of reconciliation. How can we even imagine reconciliation without accounting for the crimes for which we are being asked to reconcile? And sometimes people are starting to engage with different type of violence only after 100 years, because it takes them years to understand what happened to them, to their neighbors, to their ancestors. So I think that it is not about playfulness, and hence limits should not be put to playfulness. Limits should be put to the way that this violence, this imperial violence that became the regimes under which we are being governed, how to put limits to this regime. And this regime is run by technologies, and we have to limit those technologies. Those technologies is progress, is one of them. Photography as a process of accumulation for the sake of accumulation is violence, is this kind of technology. So I'm afraid I'm not going to propose any limits. On the contrary, I encourage each and everyone who has, violence to reckon with, to continue to do that. It is part of the reconciliation. Reconciliation is not somewhere to bring us toward another technology that will tell us that peace is what we need, or that reconciliation of a certain type is what we need. What we need is to transform the condition under which we share the world with others. So, sorry, I cannot enumerate limits.
Anybody else? Yeah, I think maybe Carlos's formulation was also a bit. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, was a bit. I think that he also probably agrees with you on the fact that future and progress is not obviously the answer. I think the way he formulated it came out the opposite. But yeah, I understand his question about.
Now again, maybe I have to mute.
No, it was my fault.
We have to take turns. If not, it's no. But in terms of the limit, I guess in this playful postmodern way of. But I I find this a great challenge, what you say, Ariella, that we should all be at least trying, attempting to work with this imagery that's been given to us of the past, because from there is the potential to move something. It probably fails in many occasions, and maybe in some ways gives like a place of opportunity.
But maybe it's not a nice time to end on this agreement against progress and reckoning with the violence of the past.
Yes, we can also end. Anybody want to? I mean, it's a good opportunity maybe to ask Ariella something about even the archive text we read, or I don't know if any of the people registered have a question, but don't be shy. We have a little bit more time.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Ariel. It's really nice to listen to everything you have to say today. So I really thought of a really short quote that comes in Norma Jane Baker of Troy by Anne Carson. And while you were talking, I was thinking about this, and I would like to read the short quote, and I would like to know what you think of it. It is not really a question. It's just to see if it triggers something, because I think that it may work. Here in Norma Jane Baker of Troy, Norma Carson, she does she thinks of the word rapere, that it would be in Latin rape, but she puts it in a way that it should be understood by or understood by language, by the this link with language. So I'm gonna read it, and I would like to know what you think of it. It says, History of War, Lesson 3, to take. If you pick a flower, if you snatch a handbag, if you possess a woman, if you plunder a storehouse, ravage a countryside, or occupy a city, you're a taker. You are taken. In ancient Greek, you use the verb, and it comes in Greek, which comes over into Latin as rapio, rapere, raptus sum, and gives us English rapture and rape, words stained with the very early blood of girls, with the very late blood of cities, with the hysteria of the end of a world. Sometimes I think language should cover its own eyes when it speaks. And I would say, sometimes photography or art should cover its own eyes when it speaks. But it may go, it may not be related, but I felt that it kind of was. So it was just this. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing it. It is related. And I don't have anything to add to it. I think it's very strongly written, very powerfully written. So thank you for bringing it.
I think, Paula.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how to put it as a question, but I'm just going to start talking about this that I've been thinking about throughout the talk, which I find really, really interesting, especially this idea of the untaken photograph or the undeveloped photograph, in this case of rape, but of any kind or of any hecho, thing that happens. And I'm thinking in our responsibility, not only in terms of archive and of looking at history through that lens that you put there, that is, I think, really, really important and relevant, but also how today we're flooded by images also, and in this many images that we're flooded by, there are also missing things that we're not seeing, and how we're responsible to see, no, or to see even what we don't want to see, no? Because here, when you talk about these images of rape, I can already imagine them and imagine the horror, no, of those images, if they exist or not. No, they exist now in my mind. And I think that's really powerful. And now if I think of today and the many horrors that we know are happening everywhere, no? And many of them we see, others we don't, and many of them we decide not to see, maybe also because it's so difficult. And I want to ask about this responsibility that, as a viewer, like if you can say something about that, how we all have that responsibility in terms of images, not really see the world in terms of these ideas, no, of the image. I don't know if this makes any sense, but it's something that's been circling there about, like, today, really what it's being produced and what we're seeing, and how our responsibility is not only there in the past, but it's here every day.
Yeah, so thank you. I have two things to respond to it. One of them is that I question this notion of the past, because I think that, as I spoke briefly, but I am doing it, in lengths in the book, the invention of the past is an imperial project. There is no such a thing like past. They really invented it in order to put this in the past, to expect us to move forward. So everything, or whenever we engage with violence, we engage with it where we are with other people. Some of them are living, some of them are dead. But the fact that they were assassinated doesn't exclude them from the space that we are trying to create when we deal with violence. So I think that our responsibility as viewers or spectators is, first of all, to reject this separation between the tenses that give us this kind of impression that our faces should turn to the future, and we have to stop dealing with the past because we really need to be responsible for the present. But the present is the immediate outcome of this thing that is being invented as past. And our ancestors were never so distant from us as they became through this technology of the past. So I think that our responsibility is to make them present with us when we are speaking. And the other thing that I wanted to say in response to what you're asking is that I forgot what was the other thing. Remind me the beginning of your question, and I will be. So the one, because at the end you spoke about the responsibility. Yeah. So yeah, we have a responsibility, but we have to unlearn the way that this responsibility was created throughout the history of imperialism, which is the kind of cosmopolitan responsibility or unsituated subject viewer or subject spectator. We have to ask ourselves from where we are speaking, and to engage with whatever we are speaking in relation to where we are, rather than supporting this idea that there are spectators and there are victims at which we are looking. We have to ask ourselves how the violence that we are looking at is related to us. not only on a family basis, that we have to have an ancestor who was a victim of violence, how it is related, for example, to our citizenship, how it is related to our privileges, how it is related to the way that we perceive the world, how it is related to the way that we do not perceive the world, etc., etc. So yes, we have to be responsible as spectators, but not in the way that we have been taught, which is the unsituated universal spectator.
Thank you, Ariella. Thank you.
Yes, it makes me think something I was writing down at the beginning of the talk when you spoke of the war is over. And you, as you say, Algerian Jew, displaced already, how this, of course, allows you to see that sentence of the war is over in Europe then in a different way. And I think part of this responsibility, as you mentioned, I think is for all of us to realize that we are all somehow fabricated national beings, or where we are. I think this is where I'm very interested in also picking apart this idea of the national, is because it's a construction. So as long as we're able to do that, which is everybody's responsibility, it doesn't matter where we're from. I think if we're here, the big thing in Mexico now is the original peoples, los pueblos originarios. So it's obviously a different position for those, but current artists are now engaging with this question, and I'm not sure if always in a responsible way, let's say, taking responsibility and how they've participated, or their position of privilege has participated in also this fabrication of violence. But I think it's such an important point that you make, for us to be active and not passive. And thank you very much. I don't know if somebody else wants to say something.
I said, thank you so much for inviting me. And I hope some of what we discussed resonate with what you did. And when I'll meet you soon elsewhere, I hope we will continue this conversation.
Definitely. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ariella. Thank you so much for your talk, and all your disagreements are important also to yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.